my God. No.
A poor maid begins working in a billionaire's mansion when she stumbles upon an old photograph, and in that picture, she sees her own childhood face. From that moment, a shocking secret unravels. Is she really just a maid, or the mansion's long-lost daughter? The evening sun dipped low over the sprawling estate, painting the sky in amber and crimson. The mansion of the Dlamini family stood like a fortress of wealth, its marble pillars glistening in the last light of day. Cars with tinted windows glided up the curved driveway, dropping off guests in dazzling gowns and polished suits. Laughter spilled out through the open doors as chandeliers glittered within. But in the shadows of the kitchen courtyard, far from the glamour, a young maid balanced a tray of silver glasses. Her shoulders stooped under more than just the weight she carried. Her name was Amahle. She was only 19, yet life had hardened her eyes and thinned her frame. Her faded uniform, patched at the elbows, clung to her slight body as she weaved between older maids who barked at her to hurry. She rarely spoke. In the mansion, silence was her survival. Amahle had grown up in an orphanage on the dusty outskirts of Durban. The headmistress there had told her, again and again, that her parents had abandoned her. "You should be grateful anyone keeps you alive," the woman would say when Amahle dared to ask questions, and so she grew up believing she was nothing more than a forgotten child of no one. When she was 16, she was sent to work at the Dlamini mansion. From that day, her fate seemed sealed. She was to serve others, unseen and unheard. But Amahle carried something deep inside her, a stubborn spark, a quiet sense that her story wasn't finished. Sometimes, late at night, when the other servants were asleep, she would stare at the golden ceilings of the mansion and wonder why its corridors felt strangely familiar, why certain corners stirred echoes in her chest. On this particular evening, she was assigned to the banquet hall. The billionaire matriarch, Madam Thandeka Dlamini, was hosting a charity gala. Madam Thandeka was tall and graceful, her skin glowing under the chandelier light. Diamonds shimmered at her ears, and her smile carried the weight of authority. To Amahle, she was like a queen, untouchable, powerful, far removed from her world of faded aprons and dishwater hands. Yet, as Amahle slipped into the hall, tray balanced carefully, Madam Thandeka's eyes flickered toward her for the briefest moment. The maid felt it, that pause, that strange, searching gaze. It was gone in a second, replaced by laughter as the lady turned back to her guests. But Amahle's heart had already quickened. Why had she looked at her like that? Hours passed. Music swelled, speeches were given, and glasses clinked in toasts to wealth and generosity. Amahle moved like a ghost among them, serving, collecting, bowing her head. No one noticed her. No one except one man. In the far corner of the hall stood Mr. Mbeki, the family's business advisor. He was tall, his shoulders broad under a dark suit, his face hidden in half shadow. His eyes followed Amahle wherever she went, sharp and unreadable. She felt their weight but dared not meet them. Something about him unsettled her, a quiet menace, as though he knew things no one else did. When the gala finally ended, the guests drifted away and the mansion quieted. Amahle carried the last tray back toward the kitchens. Her legs ached, and she longed for her thin mattress in the servants' quarters. Yet as she passed the grand staircase, something pulled her gaze upward. Above the stairs hung a vast, golden-framed portrait, one she had never noticed before. It had been draped for months under a velvet cloth, hidden from view. Tonight, the cloth had been removed, and the painting shone in the soft lamplight. Amahle froze, her breath caught in her throat. The portrait showed a family, Madam Thandeka, a man with stern eyes beside her, and 2 children. The boy looked older, perhaps 7. The girl looked no older than 3. Her cheeks were round, her smile wide, but it was her eyes that struck Amahle like a bolt of lightning. They were her eyes. Amahle dropped the tray with a clatter. Glasses shattered, the sound echoing through the empty hall. Her hands trembled as she stared at the little girl in the portrait. The same curve of the brow, the same dimples, the same birthmark near the left temple. It was like looking into a mirror of her own forgotten childhood. Her chest heaved. Memories stirred flashes she had buried, a hand holding hers, the sound of laughter in a grand hall, a voice calling her name Amahle. Not the orphanage, not the dusty streets, but here, in this very mansion. Before she could make sense of it, footsteps echoed behind her. She turned to see Madam Thandeka, standing in the shadows, her eyes wide, her lips parted. For a long moment, the two women stared at each other, the maid and the billionaire. Something unspoken passed between them. And then, from the darker shadows beyond, Mr. Mbeki stepped forward, his voice low and heavy. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his gaze fixed coldly on Amahle. Amahele's heart pounded. She could not tell if she was in danger or if she had just stumbled upon the secret that would change her life forever. The broken shards of glass still glittered across the marble floor as silence gripped the great hall. Amahle's hands trembled, her breath shallow, but her eyes remained fixed on the portrait above. The little girl's gaze from the canvas seemed alive, as if calling to her across the gulf of years. Madam Thandeka stepped closer, her gown rustling softly. The diamonds at her ears swayed as she tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Her voice, usually smooth and commanding, trembled ever so slightly. "Where did you come from, child?" Amahle flinched. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. For years she had lived in silence, her questions swallowed. Now, faced with the most powerful woman she knew, her tongue felt heavy. I work here, madam," she whispered. But Thandeka's gaze did not move. It lingered on Amahle's eyes, her jawline, the faint birthmark that the maid had always tried to hide beneath her hair. The billionaire lady's fingers rose unconsciously to her lips, as though she feared speaking the thought forming in her mind. Before another word could be said, the sharp voice of Mr. Mbeki cut through the tension. "She's clumsy, madam," he said, striding forward with measured steps. "The girl has no business wandering near the family gallery. I warned the staff many times, keep the lower servants out of sight." Amahle lowered her head instantly, ashamed yet furious at the same time. But Madam Thandeka did not look at Mbeki. She continued to study the maid, her brows knitting, her breath uneven. "Leave us," Thandeka finally said, her voice low but firm. For a moment, Mbeki's jaw tightened. His eyes flashed, and Amahle caught the faintest glimpse of something dark beneath his calm exterior, fear, perhaps, or anger. But he bowed his head and stepped back. "As you wish, madam." He lingered, though, watching as though the room itself belonged to him. Then, with a swish of his black coat, he disappeared into the shadows of the corridor. The hall fell silent once more. Madam Thandeka moved closer, until she stood directly in front of Amahle. The woman's perfume was rich, her presence overwhelming. She reached out a hand, hesitated, then gently lifted Amahle's chin. The maid's dark eyes met hers, and in that instant both women felt the undeniable pull of recognition. "What is your name?" Thandeka asked softly. "Amahle, madam." Thandeka's lips parted. The name struck her like a forgotten melody. Long ago, that same name had been whispered in lullabies, sung in gentle tones to a baby cradled in her arms. Her throat tightened, and for a moment she thought she might faint. But before emotion could overtake her, the echo of Mbeki's footsteps reminded her that danger lurked. She straightened, masking her trembling heart. "Go back to the servants' quarters. We will speak again soon," she ordered, her tone firm once more. Amahle nodded, though confusion stormed inside her. As she gathered the shards of broken glass, her mind whirled with questions. Why had Madam Thandeka looked at her that way? Why did the child in the portrait carry her face? And why had Mbeki's eyes burned with something close to fury when he saw her staring at it? That night, Amahle could not sleep. The image of the portrait haunted her. She saw herself in that golden frame, smiling as if she belonged there. She remembered faint sounds, laughter echoing through halls, much like these, warm arms lifting her high, a voice promising never to let her go. Were they dreams or forgotten memories? In the next room, the older maids whispered, "Did you see Madam tonight? She looked pale after the gala." "Something is troubling her. Maybe it's the family secrets." "Hush. Speak too loudly and you'll lose your tongue." Amahle pressed her ear to the thin wall, but the whispers faded. Secrets, always secrets in this house. The following day, Madam Thandeka summoned her privately. Amahle entered the lady's chamber with trembling knees. The room was vast, draped in silk curtains, filled with the scent of jasmine. On the wall opposite the bed hung another painting, not a family portrait, but a single child's likeness. It was unfinished, the brushstrokes fading at the edges. Yet the child's eyes glowed with life, eyes Amahle recognized as her own. Thandeka sat by the window, the morning light casting her features in soft gold. She turned, her expression torn between sorrow and hope. "Tell me, Amahle," she said gently, "do you remember nothing of your parents?" Amahle swallowed hard. "I was told they abandoned me at the orphanage." Pain flickered in Thandeka's eyes. She clasped her hands tightly in her lap. "You were not abandoned." Before Amahle could ask more, the door creaked open. Mr. Mbeki entered without knocking, his face smooth but his eyes sharp. He bowed slightly. "Forgive the intrusion, madam. The board awaits your decision on tomorrow's investment meeting." Thandeka stiffened, her lips pressed into a thin line. She rose to her full height, regal once more. "Very well, Mbeki, I will come shortly." But before leaving, the man's gaze slid to Amahle, piercing and cold. It was not the look of a mere advisor toward a servant, it was the look of someone guarding a dangerous secret. After he left, Thandeka's hands trembled as she touched Amahle's cheek. "Be careful," she whispered. "Not everyone in this house wishes the truth to be known." Amahle's heart pounded. The truth. The word rang like thunder in her mind. Whatever it was, she was now certain of one thing. Her life was about to change, and the mansion she had served in silence for years held answers that had been hidden from her since childhood. And in the corridors beyond, Mr. Mbeki's shadow lengthened, his plans tightening like a noose. The mansion carried a new weight for Amahle after that night. Every corridor, every archway, every shadow whispered to her, as though the walls themselves remembered her footsteps from long ago. She had always felt like a ghost drifting through its grand halls. But now she wondered if perhaps it was her home that had been waiting for her return all along. Yet fear gnawed at her heart. Madam Thandeka's trembling words, "Be careful, not everyone wishes the truth to be known," echoed in her mind. And the way Mr. Mbeki's cold eyes had cut through her like a knife testing the weakness of flesh made her shiver whenever she thought of him. Still, curiosity burned stronger than fear. That evening, after the house had quieted, Amahle crept from the servants' quarters. The moonlight bathed the corridors in silver, and the silence magnified every creak of the wooden floor beneath her bare feet. She moved carefully, clutching a small oil lamp she had borrowed from the kitchen. Her steps carried her to the grand gallery where the portrait hung. The child's face smiled down at her, a frozen reflection of her own. Amahle's fingers brushed the frame, and for the first time, she noticed something strange, the initials carved faintly into the bottom corner of the painting. A.D. Her breath caught. She had never been told her surname at the orphanage. The staff had only called her Amahle. Could the letters stand for Amahle Dlamini? The thought thundered in her chest. Behind her, the sound of soft movement broke the silence. She spun around, lamp trembling in her grip. A figure stepped into the moonlight. It was Lindue, an older maid, her face lined with years of labor and secrets. She raised her hand in warning. "Child, what are you doing here? You'll bring danger upon yourself." Amahle swallowed. "Lindue, please, tell me the truth. Why does the child in this painting look like me?" The older woman's eyes softened, but fear flickered across her face. She glanced around, lowering her voice. "I cannot say much, but I will tell you this. You were not abandoned. You were taken." Amahle's knees weakened. Taken? By who? Before Lindue could answer, a sharp noise echoed through the hall, the clicking of polished shoes on marble. Both women froze. Mr. Mbeki emerged from the shadows, his tall figure cutting across the gallery, his lips curved in a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Ah, the little maid wandering where she doesn't belong again." His gaze flicked to Lindue. "And you know the rules. Servants stay silent." Lindue's shoulders stiffened. She bowed her head, her lips pressed tight. Amahle tried to speak, but Mbeki's presence smothered the air around her. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous softness. "Curiosity is a dangerous habit, Amahle. It leads to trouble, the kind that ruins lives." Amahle's heart pounded. She wanted to ask him what he knew, why he looked at her as though she were a threat, but her throat locked. Mbeki's eyes were like iron, unyielding and cruel. He leaned closer, his words meant for her ears alone. Forget what you saw. If you value your place here, you will keep your head down and your mouth shut. Then, with a final glance at the portrait, he turned and strode away, his footsteps echoing into the silence. Amahle collapsed against the wall, her lamp trembling in her hand. Lindiwe quickly took her arm. You must be careful, child. That man, he holds more power in this house than you realize. Who is he really? Amahle whispered. Lindiwe's lips pressed together as though she wanted to speak, but fear choked her. Finally, she shook her head. All I can say is this. When you were just a baby, the mansion changed forever. The little girl of the house vanished one night, and after that, darkness settled here. People whispered, but no one dared to ask questions. Since then, Mbeki has stood at Madam Thandeka's side like a shadow. Too close, if you ask me. Amale's eyes widened. You think I am that girl? Lindiwe squeezed her hand, her voice trembling. I see her in your eyes, Amahle, but proof is dangerous. If you search for it, you must be ready for the storm it brings. For the first time in her life, Amahle felt the ground beneath her shift. She was no longer simply a maid, no longer the forgotten orphan who scrubbed floors in silence. She was a question, a riddle, wrapped in secrets hidden within golden frames and whispered behind locked doors. And if what Lindiwe hinted was true, then the portrait was not just a picture. It was a clue to her stolen life. That night, as Amahle lay awake in her narrow bed, she stared at the cracked ceiling and thought of Madam Thandeka's trembling voice, of the painting's familiar eyes, of the initials carved into the frame. The truth was close. She could feel it pressing against the walls of the mansion. But so was danger. For in the darkness beyond her door, Mr. Mbeki stood silently, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, his hand resting lightly on the polished wood. His expression was calm, but in his eyes burned a warning. He would not let the past rise without a fight. The following morning dawned with golden light streaming through the tall windows of the Dlamini mansion. Amahle rose from her thin mattress in the servants' quarters, her body weary from little sleep. The echoes of Lindiwe's whispers haunted her, mingled with Mbeki's warning. You were not abandoned, you were taken. The words circled endlessly in her mind. When she reported to her duties, Amahle noticed something different. The household seemed restless. The maids moved quickly, whispering behind their hands. Guards in dark suits lingered longer in the hallways, their eyes sharper than usual. Something hung in the air, a tension that even the morning sunlight could not ease. By midday, a young footman approached her. Madam Thandeka wants to see you, alone. Amale's stomach twisted. She followed him through the gleaming corridors until she was brought to the grand drawing room. The air was heavy with jasmine and polish. At the far end, Madam Thandeka stood near a tall window, her silhouette outlined by the blazing sky outside. Leave us, she commanded, and the footman bowed before closing the doors. For a long moment, Thandeka said nothing. Her back remained turned, her posture regal, yet trembling. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than Amahle had ever heard it. When I looked into your eyes last night, I saw her, my daughter. Amahle's breath caught. She did not move, afraid even the smallest sound would break the fragile moment. Thandeka turned at last, and for the first time Amahle saw not the untouchable matriarch of wealth, but a mother carrying 20 years of grief. Tears glistened at the corners of her eyes as she crossed the room and took Amahle's hands. You must understand, she said, her voice trembling. Years ago, I had a daughter. She was 3 when she disappeared. One night, she was in her bed, and the next morning, gone. No ransom, no trace. We searched everywhere, but she had vanished as though the earth swallowed her whole. They told me she must be dead, but a mother's heart does not forget. Her grip tightened on Amahle's trembling hands. And now you stand before me, with her eyes, her mark, even her name. Tell me, child, what do you remember? Amahle's throat constricted. Memories surged, fleeting images, half-formed. A lullaby hummed softly, warm arms cradling her, the sparkle of a chandelier above her crib, a kiss on her forehead. Then darkness, a cold room, strange hands carrying her away. She had always thought they were dreams, fragments of imagination, but standing before Thandeka, they felt real. I don't know. Amahle whispered, tears spilling unbidden. "I was told at the orphanage that my parents abandoned me, that no one wanted me." Thandeka gasped, covering her mouth with trembling fingers. Her shoulders shook as she whispered, "My God, they lied to you." Both women wept silently, their tears bridging years of pain. Amahle had never known what it felt like to be held by a mother, and now, as Thandeka drew her into her arms, she felt something inside her break and mend at the same time. It was as though the hollow in her chest finally filled. But their moment was cut short. The door opened without warning, and Mr. Mbeki strode in. His eyes scanned the scene, the maid in Thandeka's arms, the tears streaking down both faces. His expression darkened. "Madam," he said sharply, "this is dangerous. You are letting sentiment blind you. She is a servant, nothing more." Thandeka's spine stiffened. She turned to him with fury in her eyes. "Enough, Mbeki! Do you take me for a fool? I know what I see. I know my own child." Amahle stepped back, startled by the sudden fire in the lady's voice. But Mbeki did not flinch. Instead, he moved closer, his tone colder. "With all respect, madam, grief makes people see what they wish to see. This girl has no proof of her claim. And if word spreads of such fantasies, it could destroy the family's reputation. The board, the shareholders, they will not tolerate it. You must think of the estate, of your position." Thandeka's lips trembled. For a moment, doubt flickered across her face. Her power had always been tied to the family's image, the company's empire. To risk it all on hope, it was a dangerous gamble. Amahle's heart sank. She wanted to scream, to shout the truth she felt burning inside her, but her voice was trapped by fear. Mbeki's gaze slid to her, hard and calculating. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a venomous whisper. "You would be wise to stay in your place, Amahle. Do not mistake kindness for belonging." Thandeka's head snapped toward him. "That is enough. Mbeki, leave us." For the first time, anger cracked through her polished composure. Her voice thundered in the chamber, and even the shadows seemed to recoil. Mbeki's jaw clenched, but he bowed with forced respect. "As you wish, madam." His eyes lingered on Amahle, sharp as a blade, before he turned and stalked out, the doors slamming behind him. Silence fell. Thandeka turned back to Amahle, her tears still glistening. "Do not fear him, child. If you are who I believe you are, no shadow will keep you hidden forever. But we must be careful. If Mbeki truly knows more than he shows, then the truth may be more dangerous than either of us imagined." Amahle nodded slowly, her heart pounding with both fear and hope. For the first time in her life, someone had called her more than a servant, more than an orphan. Someone had called her daughter. But as she returned to the servants' quarters that evening, she caught sight of Mbeki watching from the balcony above, his eyes dark as the night sky, and in that gaze she read a silent promise a storm was coming. That night, Amahle lay awake on her thin mattress in the servants' quarters. The rain tapped steadily against the windows, and the wind whispered through the cracks of the old wooden walls. Sleep would not come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Madam Thandeka's face, the tears, the trembling voice, the desperate hope. "You are my daughter." The words echoed like a heartbeat inside her, yet doubt gnawed at her. Could it really be true? Could she, a girl who had scrubbed floors and carried laundry her whole life, truly be the lost child of one of the wealthiest families in South Africa? If it was true, then someone had stolen her past. And if someone had stolen her past, they could try to steal her future as well. By morning, Amahle had made a decision. She could not sit idly, waiting for fate to unfold. If she wanted answers, she had to seek them herself. Her chance came when she was asked to clean the east wing of the mansion, a part of the house rarely used. The hallways there smelled of dust and old varnish, the portraits covered in sheets, the doors locked. She moved carefully, her eyes searching for any clue. At the end of one corridor, she discovered a door slightly ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mothballs. A forgotten storage room. She stepped inside, her footsteps muffled by an old rug. Sunlight slanted through half-closed shutters, illuminating stacks of boxes, covered furniture, and a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. Something drew her attention to a wooden chest tucked beneath a table. It was old, its brass edges dulled with time. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside lay a bundle of children's clothes, folded carefully despite the dust of years. A tiny dress embroidered with blue thread, a pair of worn leather shoes, and beneath them, a silver locket, tarnished but intact. Amahle picked it up, her breath catching as it swung open to reveal 2 miniature portraits, a young Thandeka, smiling with radiant joy, and a baby girl with round cheeks and bright eyes. The baby's face was her own. Amahle dropped to her knees, clutching the locket to her chest as tears blurred her vision. Proof. Not just hope or resemblance, but something real. Her identity, hidden for years, whispered back at her through the delicate chain. But she was not alone. From the shadows of the doorway, Mbeki watched silently. His eyes glimmered with cold fury as he saw the locket in her hands. Quietly, he withdrew, his mind racing. He had spent 2 decades ensuring that secret remained buried. If Amahl brought the truth into the light, it would not only ruin Thandeka, but destroy everything he had built, the wealth, the control, the influence he wielded from behind the curtains of the Dlamini Empire. That night, in the privacy of his study, Mbeki poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared at the rain streaking down the window. His jaw tightened as he muttered to himself, "She was supposed to be gone, dead, and now she returns like a ghost to haunt me. No, I will not allow it." He picked up the phone and dialed a number. "There's a girl in this house, a maid. She's beginning to ask questions. I want her watched. And if she strays too close to the truth, make sure she disappears quietly." Meanwhile, Amahle carried the locket hidden in her pocket, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and hope. She wanted to run straight to Madam Thandeka to show her the proof, to embrace her as mother and daughter at last. But something held her back. Mbeki's eyes. The way he had stared at her, the venom in his words, the quiet promise of danger. She knew he was not finished with her. That night, as she prepared to sleep, she heard footsteps outside her quarters, too heavy for the other maids, too deliberate for chance. She snuffed her candle and pressed against the wall, her breath shallow. The handle of her door rattled once, then again. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. After a long silence, the footsteps retreated. Her hands shook as she gripped the locket. She knew then that she could not wait any longer. The shadows were closing in. If she wanted to survive, if she wanted to claim her life, she would have to be braver than she had ever been. Tomorrow, she told herself, she would confront Thandeka with the locket. Tomorrow, she would demand the truth. But outside, hidden in the darkness of the mansion's gardens, 2 men stood in the rain, watching the windows of the servants' quarters. Their orders were clear. If the maid became too dangerous, she would never see another dawn. The morning came gray and heavy, the sky blanketed with thick clouds. Amahle clutched the silver locket in her pocket as she walked through the grand corridors of the mansion. Each step echoed like a drumbeat in her chest. Today, she told herself, everything would change. When she reached the drawing room, Madam Thandeka was seated by the fireplace, sipping tea with her hands trembling ever so slightly. Amahle hesitated at the door, her courage wavering, before she finally stepped forward. "Madam," she whispered. Thandeka looked up. Her tired eyes softened at the sight of her. "Amahle, come closer." Amahle approached, her hands shaking as she pulled the locket from her pocket. The metal gleamed dully in the firelight. She held it out with trembling fingers. "I found this in one of the old rooms." Thandeka gasped, nearly dropping her teacup. She snatched the locket with a cry, her eyes widening as she opened it, and when she saw the tiny portraits inside, her composure shattered. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she pressed the locket to her lips. "This was hers. This was my baby's," she sobbed. Her gaze darted between the picture and Amahle, as if the years had dissolved and the child had returned. "Do you see? Do you see it, child? You are her. You are my daughter." Amale's throat tightened. She wanted to believe, to fall into her mother's arms without question. Yet a shadow lingered in her mind. Mbeki's voice, his threats, the footsteps outside her door. Before she could speak, the double doors burst open. Mr. Mbeki strode in, his dark suit crisp, his expression carefully composed. 2 of the household board members trailed behind him, men of influence, men who held stakes in the family empire. "Madam," Mbeki said smoothly, bowing his head with feigned respect, "I was told there was an urgent matter. His eyes flickered toward Amahle and the locket in Thandeka's hands. Ah, I see. Thandeka rose, fury and hope blazing in her voice. Becky, the lies end today. Look at this locket. It is proof. My child is alive, and she stands before us. But Mbecky's lips curved in a cold smile. He stepped forward with theatrical calm. Madam, with all due respect, this is a dangerous illusion. That locket was stolen from the family vault. The room fell silent. Amahle's eyes widened. That's not true. I found it in the East Wing. But Mbecky's voice rolled smooth and certain, weaving lies like silk. Guards discovered the vault tampered with last night. And now, coincidentally, this girl presents herself as your daughter, waving stolen jewelry as proof. He looked at the board members, his tone dripping with gravity. A clever scheme. No doubt a servant pretending to be heir, hoping to claim fortune and status. The men murmured, their eyes narrowing with suspicion. No, Thandeka cried, clutching the locket protectively. This is hers, I know it. But doubt crept across her face, the poison of Mbecky's words seeping in. Amahle stepped forward desperately. I swear on my life, madam, I did not steal it. I have memories, shadows of this house, of your voice. You have to believe me. Yet Mbeki was ready. He pulled a folded document from his pocket and placed it on the table. If you require further proof, madam, here are the adoption records from the orphanage where she was raised. The papers show clearly her parents abandoned her. She is no blood of yours. Amahle froze. Adoption papers? But she had never seen such documents. Where had he obtained them? Or worse, had he forged them? Thandeka's face crumpled, torn between hope and reason. Her fingers trembled on the locket as she whispered, Amahle, I want to believe. But what if this is all a trick? What if grief blinds me again? Amale's heart broke. She fell to her knees before the woman, her voice cracking. I don't want your wealth. I don't want your mansion. I only want to know who I am. I only want the truth. For a moment, silence filled the room. The fire crackled, the storm outside rattled the windows, and then Mbecky's voice sliced through it like a blade. The truth is simple, madam. This girl is an imposter. She has no place here. Allow me to remove her quietly, before she causes more damage. He gestured to the guards outside. Amale's blood ran cold as two men stepped into the room, their hands twitching near their weapons. But Thandeka lifted her hand sharply. No, she stays, until I have answers. Her voice wavered, but her will held firm. If there is even a chance she is mine, I will not turn her away. Becky's jaw tightened, fury flashing in his eyes. He bowed stiffly. As you wish, madam, but I warn you, hesitation could cost us dearly. The board members exchanged uneasy glances as they left, whispers trailing behind them. The guards withdrew. Only Amahle, Thandeka, and Mbeki remained. Mbeki's gaze locked on Amahle as he turned to leave. His words barely more than a whisper. Enjoy your victory, little maid. It will be short-lived. The doors closed behind him with a final, ominous thud. Amahle trembled where she knelt. Thandeka knelt beside her, cupping her face with tear-stained hands. Child, do not lose faith. Lies may surround us, but the truth has a way of surviving. I will find it, we will find it together. Amahle clung to her, her heart torn between fear and hope. For the first time, she was no longer alone. But outside, in the dimly lit corridor, Mbeki dialed his men again. This time, his voice was venom. No more games. If she stays, she will ruin everything. The maid must be silenced, permanently. Night fell over the Dlamini mansion like a velvet shroud, heavy with secrets. The air smelled of rain-soaked earth, and the cicadas sang their restless chorus. Amahle lay on her mattress, clutching the locket close to her chest. Madam Thandeka's promise echoed in her mind. We will find the truth together. But so did Mbeki's whisper. Enjoy your victory, little maid. It will be short-lived. She could not shake the dread in her stomach. Shadows pressed close around her, and every creak of the old servants' quarters made her heart jolt. At last, exhaustion dragged her into uneasy sleep. She woke with a start. Something was wrong. The air smelled faintly of smoke. Amahle sat up, blinking into the darkness. A thin wisp of gray curled under the door. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She scrambled to her feet, clutching the locket as the smoke thickened. Her throat burned. Someone had set fire to the quarters. She stumbled to the door, but when she pulled, it wouldn't budge. The handle had been locked from the outside. Panic clawed at her chest. She beat against the wood, coughing, "Help! Somebody, please!" No answer, only the crackling sound of flames licking the old timbers. She dropped to the floor, crawling through the thick smoke toward the small window above her bed. She shoved it open, the frame stiff with age, and gulped the cold night air. But the window was too small to climb through. She was trapped. Her vision blurred. Tears streamed down her soot-stained face. Just as the smoke threatened to choke her, she heard voices outside. "Break it down." The door burst open with a crash. 2 guards rushed in, covering their mouths with cloths. One lifted Amahle into his arms, carrying her out into the cool air. She coughed violently, her lungs screaming as she collapsed onto the grass. From the balcony above, Madam Thandeka appeared in her nightgown, her face pale with horror. "Amahle!" she cried, rushing down the stairs to kneel at her side. She gathered the girl into her arms, stroking her soot-blackened hair. "My child! My child!" But not everyone wore horror on their face. At the edge of the courtyard, in the shadows near the stables, Mbeki stood silently, his expression unreadable. His eyes glinted as the flames were extinguished by hurried servants. When he saw Amahle alive in Thandeka's embrace, his jaw clenched. His first attempt had failed. Later, when the chaos had quieted, Thandeka sat with Amahle in her private chambers. A physician tended to her burns and smoke-strained lungs, but Thandeka refused to leave her side. She gripped Amahle's hand with fierce determination. "This was no accident," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Someone wants you gone, but I will not allow it. Whoever did this will answer to me." Amahle wanted to speak Mbeki's name, but fear silenced her. She could not prove it, not yet. And Mbeki's power stretched too far into the guards, the board, perhaps even the law itself. Instead, she whispered, "Why, madam? Why would anyone want me dead?" Thandeka's face darkened. "Because if you are who I believe you are, then your very existence threatens the foundations of this household. And there are those who would kill to keep those foundations unshaken." She pressed the locket back into Amahle's palm. "Keep this with you. Never let it out of your sight. It is more than a trinket, it is your shield, your proof, your voice, when no one will listen." Amahle nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. But Mbeki was not idle. In his study, he paced the floor, fury radiating from every step. "The fire should have ended this," he hissed, but she slips through death's fingers again. One of his hired men shifted uneasily. Perhaps it's fate, sir. Perhaps she..." Mbeki's glare silenced him instantly. "Fate is for fools. I make my own destiny." He poured himself a drink, his hand trembling with suppressed rage. "If fire cannot silence her, then we must turn the house itself against her. We will paint her as the snake in our garden. Let her own presence condemn her." His plan was already taking shape. The next morning, whispers began to ripple through the household. Servants muttered that Amahle had started the fire herself, seeking attention, seeking sympathy from Madam Thandeka. Rumors spread like dry grass catching flame. Amahle felt the stairs burn her as she walked the halls. The other maids shrank from her. Some hissed insults under their breath. And when she brought breakfast to the dining hall, one of the board members sneered openly. "Keep your little arsonist away from me," he muttered. Amahle's heart sank, and Becky's web of lies was already spinning tight. But Thandeka's hand came down firmly on her shoulder. She lifted her chin, her voice carrying the strength of a queen. "Amahle stays. She is under my protection." Her words silenced the room, but only for a moment. And Becky stood at the far end of the table, watching, calculating. He knew he had lost the battle of fire, but the war was far from over. Amahle, still trembling, realized something that night. If she was to survive, she could no longer remain the frightened maid who waited for rescue. She had to fight for her life, her truth, and her place in the world. For the first time, she did not pray simply to be saved. She prayed for courage. Days passed after the fire, but the memory lingered like smoke clinging to walls. Amahle walked through the mansion under suspicious eyes, whispers following her every step. Still, she carried herself with quiet strength, the silver locket always hidden beneath her blouse. Madam Thandeka shielded her as best she could, yet even her authority could not fully silence the rumors. And Becky had done his work well. But Amahle refused to cower. In the evenings when the household grew quiet, she searched. Somewhere within these walls lay the truth, and she would find it no matter how deeply Mbeki had buried it. One night, while dusting the shelves of the old library, Amahle's candle flickered over a strange detail. A section of the tall bookshelf looked uneven, as if the wood had been disturbed. She pressed her fingers against it, and to her shock, the panel shifted slightly. Behind it was a narrow cavity, barely large enough for a bundle of papers wrapped in cloth. Her heart pounded as she pulled it free. It was an old leather-bound ledger, its cover cracked with age. By the weak glow of the candle, she flipped it open. Inside were records of transactions, money withdrawn from the family accounts 2 decades ago. Large sums, marked under vague descriptions. But as she traced the ink with her fingers, one entry froze her. Payment to St. Mary's Orphanage for the care and relocation of child A.D. Amahle's breath caught. A.D. Those were her initials. Amahle Dlamini. Her hands shook as she turned the pages. More entries followed, payments made monthly, then suddenly cut off. The dates aligned with her earliest memories of the orphanage, the cold dormitories, the rough hands of caretakers. This ledger was proof. Someone had paid to hide her away, someone from within the Dlamini estate. She closed the book, clutching it to her chest. At last the shadows whispered truth. But the shadows also had ears. From the balcony above, Mbeki watched her with a serpent's smile. He had anticipated her curiosity. He had left the ledger hidden not as a mistake, but as bait. That very night, he summoned the household to the main hall. Guards flanked the room, their faces grim. The board members sat stiffly in their chairs, summoned from their beds. Thandeka stood near the fireplace, confusion etched on her tired face. Amahle was dragged in by 2 guards, the ledger clutched tightly in her hands. Mbeki's voice rang out, smooth and cold. Behold, the serpent among us. Not only a thief, but a traitor. She was caught stealing sensitive family documents, attempting, no doubt, to blackmail us with lies. Gasps echoed through the room. Amahle tried to speak, but one of the guards yanked her arm, silencing her. Thandeka stepped forward, fire in her eyes. What is the meaning of this, Mbeki? Release her at once. But Mbeki only bowed slightly, his performance flawless. Madam, with respect, you are too close to this matter. This girl has manipulated your grief. She is no daughter of yours, only a cunning servant who seeks to exploit your pain. Lest. He gestured to the ledger. These are private accounts, madam. How else could she have obtained them, except through theft? Shall we allow such deceit to continue under this roof? The board members murmured, some nodding. Doubt spread like a disease. Amahle's voice broke free at last. It's not theft, it's the truth. These records show payments to the orphanage to hide me away. Don't you see? Someone paid to erase me. The men laughed bitterly. Convenient lies, one sneered. Thandeka's gaze flickered between her daughter and the board, torn between love and fear. Her voice wavered. Amahl, what did you find? Show me. Amahle tried to step forward, but the guards tightened their grip, and Becky's voice boomed over hers. Do not listen to her, madam. If she were truly your blood, why would she need to resort to such theatrics? Why would she sneak like a thief in the night? He raised his hand. I recommend immediate removal. Let her be taken away, far from this estate, before more damage is done. The words struck Amahle like a blade. Removal, exile, a second abandonment. She locked eyes with Thandeka, desperation blazing in her tear-streaked face. Please, madam. Mother, don't let him do this. You said you would find the truth with me, please. For a long moment, silence reigned. The guards held Amahle fast, and Becky's lips curled in triumph. Then Thandeka lifted her chin. Her voice trembled, but her will stood unshaken. She stays. As long as I breathe, she stays. I will not lose her again. Gasps rippled through the hall. Becky's face darkened, his victory crumbling. He forced a thin smile, bowing stiffly. As you wish, madam, but know this, you gamble the entire estate on your fragile hope. If you are wrong, the consequences will be ruin. As the household dispersed, the guards reluctantly released Amahle. She collapsed into Thandeka's arms, sobbing with relief. But in the shadows, Mbeki whispered to himself, his voice like poison. If she cannot be cast out by lies, then she will be destroyed by truth. The final card must be played. The mansion was restless that night. Servants whispered in corners, board members muttered in hushed tones, and guards lingered longer at their posts. Though Thandeka had shielded Amahle, doubt still crept through the household like a snake. Everyone sensed that something was about to break. Amahle sat with Thandeka in the private parlor, the ledger resting between them. Her hands trembled as she turned the fragile pages again and again, searching for certainty. "These payments," she whispered, "they prove someone wanted me hidden. But who? And why?" Thandeka's hand closed over hers, warm and trembling. "I feared as much. Someone inside this house betrayed us. Someone close." Before Amahle could respond, the doors slammed open. Mr. Mbeki strode in, flanked by guards. His expression was cold, his eyes burning with triumph. "Enough games," he declared. "If the truth is what you seek, then let the truth be spoken." Thandeka rose, her voice sharp. "Mbeki, you will not barge into my chambers uninvited." But he ignored her, motioning to the guards. They carried in a heavy iron box and set it on the table. With a theatrical flourish, Mbeki unlocked it and drew out a bundle of documents, neatly tied with twine. "These," he said, his voice silky, "are the records no one was meant to see. I reveal them now, not to wound, but to protect the dignity of this house." He spread the papers across the table. They were letters, contracts, receipts, all bearing the same mark, his signature. Amahle leaned forward, her heart hammering. "What are these?" Mbecky's smile widened. "Proof that it was I who arranged for your disappearance." The room froze. Thandeka's knees nearly buckled. "What did you say?" Mbecky's voice grew low. "Venomous. Yes, 20 years ago, it was I who paid the orphanage to take you, to erase you from this family. I who ensured you grew as nothing but a nameless child, while your mother wept." Amahle gasped, her stomach twisting violently. "Why? Why would you do this?" His eyes glittered with cruel satisfaction. "Because you were a threat. A mere child, yes, but a child who carried the bloodline, the inheritance, the empire. I had worked too long, too hard, to let it fall into the hands of an infant. With you gone, I could mold this house as I pleased. Without you, Thandeka was vulnerable, grieving, desperate. And in her weakness, I gained power." Thandeka staggered back, her hands clutching her chest as if struck. You stole my daughter from me?" Her voice broke into a cry of anguish. Mbecky's face hardened. "I preserved this estate when you could not. I turned tragedy into strength, and I would do it again." Amahle's tears fell hot and fast. Her entire life, every lonely night, every cruel word at the orphanage, every hunger pang had been orchestrated by the man standing before her. Not fate, not chance. Him. "You ruined me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You stole everything." Mbecky's smile twisted. "And I will not hesitate to ruin you again. The board listens to me, the guards obey me. You may have Thandeka's pity, but pity does not build empires, power does, and I hold it." Thandeka's grief ignited into fury. She stepped forward, her voice shaking with wrath. "You dare confess this in my house? Before my eyes?" Mbecky's composure wavered for the first time, but his arrogance held. "What will you do, madam? Expose me? Without me, your empire crumbles. The board will abandon you. The creditors will circle like vultures. Your daughter's return will be seen not as salvation, but as scandal. You need me, whether you admit it or not." The words struck like thunder. For a moment, silence pressed heavy on the room. Amahle's hands curled into fists. She had never felt rage burn so hot inside her. "No, she doesn't need you. Not anymore." Her voice rang louder than she had ever heard it, trembling with power. "You think you've silenced me all my life, but I am still here. I survived your fire. I survived your lies. And now the truth is out. You are the thief, not me. You stole a mother from her child, and no empire can hide that." The guards shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another. Doubt rippled through them. Thandeka stepped beside her daughter, standing tall despite her tears. "She is right. You speak of power, Mbeki, but power built on betrayal is nothing but sand. Tonight, your empire begins to fall." For the first time, Mbeki's smile cracked. His eyes darted to the guards, to the door, as though the shadows he commanded were slipping through his fingers. But his voice hardened once more. "You may think you've won, but the storm is not over. You have no idea what enemies circle this house. If you believe her return will bring peace, you are fools. It will bring ruin." With that, he swept the documents back into the box, his coat swirling behind him as he strode out. The doors slammed shut, leaving mother and daughter trembling in the silence. Amahle collapsed into Thandeka's arms, sobbing. He did it. He's the reason. All these years, Thandeka kissed her forehead, her tears mingling with her daughter's. "My child, I will never let him harm you again, no matter what it costs me." But even as she spoke, thunder rumbled outside, and the mansion's lights flickered. Mbeki's warning hung in the air like smoke. The truth was revealed, but the war had only begun. The storm outside raged like the turmoil within the mansion. Lightning tore the sky, illuminating the estate in flashes of ghostly white. For 2 days after Mbeki's confession, the house remained on edge. Servants hurried silently, board members argued in closed rooms, and guards patrolled with unease. Amahle stayed close to Thandeka, refusing to let fear silence her again. Though Mbeki's words still echoed in her mind, "You will bring ruin," she knew this was the hour to claim her life, no matter the cost. On the third night, the reckoning came. The grand ballroom had been prepared for a board meeting. Chandeliers burning bright, long polished table gleaming, and every powerful figure of the estate gathered in anxious clusters. Mbeki stood at the head of the table, his voice strong, his posture commanding. "My friends," he declared, "this house faces a crisis. A servant, an orphan, has wormed her way into Madam Thandeka's heart, claiming to be her daughter. But tonight, we put an end to this delusion." He gestured sharply. Guards marched forward, dragging Amahle into the room. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with defiance. Thandeka followed, regal and unshaken despite her sorrow. The room buzzed with whispers. Mbeki slammed his hand on the table. "Enough speculation. Tonight I reveal the final truth." From beneath his coat, he pulled a folded document sealed with wax. With a dramatic motion, he tore it open and spread it on the table. "This is the last will of the late Mr. Dlamini. It names no daughter, no child, only Thandeka as heir and myself as executor. There is no bloodline to reclaim. The girl's claims are nothing but lies." Gasps filled the room. Board members leaned forward, nodding grimly. It seemed the final nail had been struck. Amahle's heart trembled. For a moment, doubt clawed at her. What if Mbeki was right? What if she had built her hope on sand? But then she felt Thandeka's hand in hers. Warm, steady, unyielding. Thandeka's voice cut through the murmurs. "You lie, Mbeki. My husband's true will was never seen. You forged this to cover your crime." Mbeki sneered. "Bold accusation, madam. And what proof do you have?" The girl's tears. Amahle's voice rose, trembling but clear. "No, we have more." She reached into her blouse and drew out the silver locket, the one Thandeka had given her weeks ago. Slowly, she opened it in front of the board. Inside lay not just the miniature portrait of a baby, but a folded slip of paper hidden in the lining. The paper was old, yellowed with time. Amahle unfolded it with shaking fingers. The ink had faded, but the words were still clear. "To my beloved Thandeka and to our daughter Amahle, should anything befall me, know that this estate is meant for her inheritance. Protect her, for she is the light of our house." Signed, Ezekiel Dlamini. The room fell silent. Every eye fixed on the paper. Every breath seemed held in the air. Amahle raised her head, her tears shimmering. "I am Amahle Dlamini, daughter of Thandeka and Ezekiel. This is my bloodline. This is my truth." The board erupted in cries of shock. Some shouted, some cursed, others demanded the paper be verified. But the seal, the handwriting, the intimate words, all were undeniable. Mbeki's face drained of color. For the first time, his mask cracked fully. His hands shook as he reached for the paper, but Thandeka stepped between him and her daughter, her eyes blazing. "No more theft, no more lies. You stole my child once, Mbeki, but tonight you will never steal from us again." The guards hesitated, uncertain. Many shifted their stance, no longer at Mbeki's command. "Desperate," Mbeki roared. "She will destroy us all. With her return, creditors will rise, rivals will pounce. You fools cannot see she is the ruin of this house." But Amahle stepped forward, her voice ringing like thunder. "No, Mbeki, I am not the ruin. I am the redemption. For years, you built this house on betrayal. Tonight, it stands again on truth. Her words struck the room like lightning. One by one, the board members bowed their heads toward her. The guards released their grips, lowering their weapons. The tide had turned. Mbeki, cornered, tried one final desperate move. With a snarl, he lunged toward the locket, his hand outstretched. But before he could reach, the guards seized him, forcing him to the ground. His cries echoed with venom, but no one moved to help him. Thandeka embraced her daughter, her tears streaming freely. "You are mine, my Amahle, my child." Amahle clung to her mother, her heart finally whole. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of belonging, not as a servant, not as a nameless orphan, but as a daughter of the Dlamini house. The board declared it official that night. Amahle Dlamini was heir to the estate. As the storm outside broke and the dawn crept over the horizon, the mansion glowed with new light. Servants whispered with awe, guards saluted with respect, and the halls that once echoed with secrets now brimmed with truth. And though scars remained, Amahle knew she had found what she had sought her entire life. Not wealth, not power, but identity. Her true self. The maid was no more. The daughter had returned.